Thank the Lord for this opportunity that God has given us once again to come on another Thursday evening and to bring forth to you the Word of God. Tonight, I'll be talking from the subject divine favor. Divine favor. And when we break those two words down, divine means something extremely good, godlike, sacred, or heavenly. Favor is approved support or liking for someone or something in the act of kindness beyond what is due unusual. And so when we talk about divine favor, we're talking about that comes from God. God is the one that gives us favor. And also, when we get some time tonight, we'll turn to Proverbs chapter 3, I believe, and we'll read a part in that verse about receiving favor from God and man. And so tonight I'll be dealing with Genesis chapter 37, 1 through 11, and then we'll be going to Genesis chapter 39, 1 through 23, dealing with the subject on Joseph tonight. Now, this chapter, the subject is a very long chapters, and so we will not have time to deal with all of the chapters. And so I encourage you to read chapters 37 through chapters 50, so you will know the entire story of Joseph. But I want to read here about divine favor. Divine favor is the unmerited supernatural grace, approved and blessings bestowed by God upon the individuals, often providing protection, divine intervention, and access to opportunities regardless of, in addition to one's own efforts. It is not merely material gain, but God's face turning toward someone, presenting his delight, love, to turn difficult situations into good. Number one, unmerited favor is not earned through works, a reflection of God's love and grace. Divine positioning allows the acceleration in bringing opportunities that might be otherwise by impossible to achieve on one's own. Protection and guidance. It surrounds believers a shield, providing covering and direction, even challenging environments. Expression of love, it signifies God's interest and delight in the individual, often increase in intimacy with him. And so we know that God is the one that gives us favor. And of course, he will allow us to have favor not only with him, but with others. And so when you have the favor of God upon your life, it is a blessing. And so we were grateful tonight. We thank God for that. So we have unmerited gift, divine positioning, protection and guidance, expression of love. And so we thank God for that. And so we're going to deal with Genesis chapter 37 first, and we're going to read verses 1 through 11. Dealing with Jacob, whose name was later changed to Israel. And we know that Jacob's name was changed to Israel because he wrestled with the angel until the breaking of day, but he would not let go of the angel until he was blessed. And so the angel touched him, the hollow of his thigh, and Jacob had a limp for the rest of his life, but God changed his name from Jacob to Israel because he received the blessing. And so in Genesis chapter 37 and verse 3, it says, "Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors." Joseph, uh, being the youngest of the brothers, and of course, Joseph in latter part of chapter 2, he brought up his brother's evil report that they were doing, and he would report back to his father what was going on. And so Jacob had a special love for his son, and because he was a son of his old age. And so he made him a coat of many colors, beautiful coat of many colors. And so verse 4 said, when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peacefully unto him. And so this was a act of favoritism that the father had on his son. And I think sometimes some families go through that favoritism where the parent might favor the other child more than one particular child, and of course the other children will feel some type of way or get jealous and feel that why they're not, favored as well. And so the brothers saw that Joseph was getting all the attention and treatment of kindness and things that was stored upon him that the brothers was not receiving. And so the brothers thought it was favoritism that the father was showing. So they hated Joseph because of that. And the Bible said they could not speak peacefully unto him. I want to say this before I move on. Sometimes when you have the favor of God upon your life, you look for haters. Everybody is not going to be happy when God begins to bless you or when God begins to have his way in your life. There's some people that's going to hate on you because of the blessing that God has placed in your life. And so, but you must not allow that to bother you, because when you are blessed and highly favored, there's nothing you can do about that. When you have the favor of God upon your life, God is working in your life and he's doing some awesome things in your life. And of course, everybody's not going to be happy about it. And so when they saw that the father was favoring Joseph more than them, they could not even speak to him. And verse 5, and Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren. And they hated him yet the more. So the brothers didn't hate Joseph because he was their brother, but the brothers hated Joseph because he was receiving the attention from the father more than them. And so they hated that. And then when Joseph had a dream, he told it to his brothers. Those of you just joining us, we're in Genesis chapter 37, and I'm at verse 5. So when Joseph told the dream to his brothers, the Bible said that they hated him yet the more. Now, I want to say this as I move on. Be careful who you share things with. You cannot tell everybody what God is doing in your life. The mistake that Joseph made, he told his dream too soon, because the dream was for him and wasn't for no one else. But he told the dream to his brothers, hoping that his brothers would be happy for him, excited for him, but that didn't happen. They hated him even because he told the dream. And so one thing about it, you may kill the dreamer, but you can't kill the dream, because the dream's still going to come to pass. And so I think about the late Dr. Martin Luther King, when he made his I Have a Dream speech. They thought because they took his life that the dream would not come to pass. But God has blessed us in the past time to have a black president. He has blessed us to have a first woman of color vice president. So God has been good to us. So the dream that Martin Luther King had, it came to pass. And so verse 6, he said, and he said unto them, Hear, I pray thee, this dream which I have dreamed. But behold, we were binding sheaves in the field. And lo, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about and made obeisance to my sheaf. And so this dream interpretation that Joseph was going to be raised up as a leader in front of his brothers. But the dream had not yet come to pass. And so the brothers didn't understand the interpretation of this. And so when he was explaining it to them, they're looking at him like they're crazy. Said, what is he talking about? And so his brothers said in verse 8, to him, shall thou indeed reign over us? Or shall thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him the more for his dreams, for his words. So the more that he told the dream to his brothers, the hatred even built up even more. One thing about it, when you are jealous of someone, and jealousy can build up. And if you don't get rid of jealousy, it will destroy you. Because jealousy will turn to hatred. Then it can turn to resentfulness. And jealousy can also turn to bitterness. And you just don't want to have no part of the individual. And so when he told his dream to his brothers, they hated him even more. And then they said, you're going to be reign over us? They didn't like that. And so he said in verse 9, he dreamed another dream and told his brethren and said, behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and 11 stars was made obeisance to me. And so all of these dreams that Joseph was having, the brothers didn't want to hear nothing about it. And so my advice to anyone, when God shows you things, keep it to yourself. because we're living in a time where you don't know nobody. And it's best to keep things to yourself and not share it with other people. Because sometimes, as I said, and I'm being repetitious when I say this, we think people will be happy for us, but that's not always the case. And especially when you have the blessings of God upon your life, everybody's not going to receive. They're not going to celebrate your happiness. There are people that rather see you down than see you up. There are people that rather see you struggling than seeing you blessed. And so we see here in Joseph is dreaming these dreams and telling it to his brothers, and yet they are hating him even more. Verse 10, it said, and he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him. So he told it to his father and to his brother, and his father rebuked him. He said, what are you talking about, son? You out of line. And said unto him, what is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? And so the father rebuked him for the dream that he was talking about. But look here in verse number 11. And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the same. So although his father rebuked him, but the father was still observing what Joseph was saying, because his father still loved Joseph and saw great potential in him. And so we're talking about Joseph and the things that is happening now. So let's skip over to chapter 39. And I told you it's a long story, so I'm not going to be able to get into everything that I'm saying. But let me look at this verse and read this. I want to why his brothers hated him so much. Let me get my little pad here, and let's see. Let's read why the brothers hated Joseph so much. Okay, Joseph's brothers hated him primarily due to an intense of jealousy over their father Jacob's open favoritism, which was highlighted by his gift of a special coat and by Joseph reporting their misdeeds. His narrative sharing of dreams predicted his future superiority over them, further fueled their animosity, leading them to sell him into slavery. Number one, intense favoritism. As a son of Jacob, old age, and favorite wife Rachel, Joseph was treated better than his brothers. The coat of many colors, this gift symbolizes Jacob's preference, sparkling deep resentment. The prophetic dreams, Joseph dreamed of sheaves of grain and essential bodies bowing to him, which the brothers interpret as arrogance. Reporting misdeeds, Joseph often brought back negative reports about his brother to their father. Fear of inheritance loss. The brothers feared Joseph would receive the birthright inheritance, replacing them. The hatred was so intense that they intentionally plotted to kill him before they deciding to sell him into slavery. And so all of this was a part of God's divine favor for Joseph. And although Joseph would have to go through some adversities, but God still was going to be with him. Now, in chapter 39, we're dealing with Joseph being sold by his brothers into slavery. And so we know that one of the brothers wanted to kill him. They put him in the pit. And of course, let me back up a little bit. The coat that he had on him, the coat of many colors, they stripped him from that coat. And they sprinkled blood on it. And they said, we'll say to the father that he was killed by a beast. And all of that to save ourselves. But they put him in the pit and left him there to die without any water or nothing. But let me tell you something about that. The pit was a part of the process of God's divine favor. The pit was not his destiny. God still had hands on Joseph. And he was not going to allow Joseph to die, because God had a purpose and a plan for him. So in chapter 39, we see here that he was sold to the Ishmaelites by his brothers for 30 pieces of silver. And like I say, when you get a chance, go back and read the story, chapters 37 to chapter 50, the story of Joseph. And verse 1 of 39, and Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, brought him to the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down hither. And so they brought him to the officer of Pharaoh, which was Potiphar. And an Egyptian, Potiphar was an Egyptian, and Joseph was placed in his hands. And the Lord, listen, verse 2, was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. So it's good to have the Lord with you. It's good to have the Lord on your side. Because if God be for you, who can be against you? So the Lord was with Joseph. After all the things that happened to him when his brothers did, God was with Joseph. And let me tell you this. My God, I'm getting excited here. It's good to have God that stand with you. If nobody else don't stand with you, it's good to have the confidence that God is on your side. Because if God is on your side, you have nothing to worry about. And so he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And so what the devil meant for evil, God turned that thing around. So actually the brothers did Joseph a favor and didn't even know it. They thought because they got rid of their brother that he was that would be the end of him. And sometimes the enemy will talk to your mind and say it's the end. But you got to have faith and confidence in God, believing that my end is not yet. God is going to give me an expected end. Because Jeremiah 29:11 said, God said, I know the thoughts that I think towards you, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. So the devil may think it's over for you, Your enemy might think it's over for you, but it's not over until God says it's over. Hallelujah. And so he says here in verse number 4, verse 3, and his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. You know, when you have God's favor for your life, there's some people gonna know it. Sometimes your enemy gonna know it. But everything that was in Joseph's hand to do, God made it to prosper. You got to be careful how you put your feet on God's people, because God will always come out a winner. So everything that Joseph's hands did, God made it to prosper. And his master saw that God was with him. And it's good to know that God is on your side. So no matter what we may face in life, no matter what obstacle that we may deal with or what we are going through, God is still with us. Whether we are in the valley, in the desert, or the wilderness, God is still on our side. Praise God. And verse 5, and it came to pass that the time that he had made him overseer, listen to this, over his house and over all he had, and the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. So not only God blessed Joseph with favor, but he blessed his master's house, because the blessing of God was upon Joseph. And sometimes when you have the favor of God upon your life, others can also receive the blessing, because you have the favor. And so everything that Potiphar had in his house, God caused it to be blessed. And so he says in verse 6, and he left all that he had in Joseph's hand to place him as overseer. And he knew not all that he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. So not only he had the favor of God, but he also had others that he was favored by. And Bishop Henry Williams used to tell us years ago, God will not let everybody be against you at the same time. He'll always raise up someone to stand in your corner with you. And so it says here, Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. Now, I want to say this. Your character has a lot to do with you, the individual. The way that you carry yourself has a lot of people wanting to be around you. And when you have good character, you mind your business and you're not, pulling down nobody, but you're always trying to speak a good word, kind, respectful. That's the kind of people that you need in your life. Your character, always carry yourself in a respectful way. If you want someone to respect you, you got to respect yourself. And so your character has a lot to do with the outcome of your future. And so it says here in verse 7, and let me say this, don't let nobody destroy your character. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, lie with me. Here now, when you have divine favor of God upon your life, the enemy gonna always try to get in the way. And he will try to stop the favor of God upon your life, because he don't want you to be happy. He don't want you to be blessed. So now Joseph has to deal with his master's wife. I'm sure Joseph probably was a good-looking person, and she looked good to her. He looked good to her. And then she said to Joseph, lie with me. Because the enemy will use anything or anybody to stop the flow of the blessings of God upon your life. And so it says here in verse 8, but he refused and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and has committed all he had to my hand. Joseph refused. He was not going to do the wrong thing. He was going to continue to do what's right. And so in verse 9, it says, there is none greater in this house than I. Neither has he kept back anything from me, because thou art his wife. And then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Joseph had everything in the house that he was overseer over. And his wife wanted Joseph. This was now a test for him. And sometimes we're going to go through some tests in our life. We're going to go through some circumstances. And so he said, how can I do such great wickedness? I can't do this against God. God has given me all of this favor, all of these blessings. And now how can I betray the Lord and do wrong? And so verse 10, it came to pass, she spake to Joseph day by day. That's how the enemy works. He never gives up, because he always wants you to throw in the towel. Temptation is not a sin until you yield to it. Let me say that again. Temptation is not a sin until you yield to it. And so she pressed him day by day. She was not going to give up on him. She said, I want this young man. I got to have him. He looked good to me. Tall, dark, and handsome. I got to have him. So she pressed upon day by day. And he hearkened not to her to lie with her or to be with her. He wouldn't do it. Now somebody would say, Um, Joseph was not a strong man, you know, or somebody may say something negative about it, but Joseph would not do it. And when you are a righteous person, you cannot do evil. You can't do it. When you have God in your life, and when you have a desire to do his will, you cannot just do evil. You can't do it. So Joseph was not going to destroy his integrity. Joseph had integrity. He was not going to destroy his character because of this woman. And so he refused. Verse 11, and it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house within. So she waited until nobody was around. See, the devil is cunning. She waited until nobody, well, I can't get him. I didn't get him yesterday, but I'm going to try to get him today. So she waited until nobody was around. And she caught him by the garment, saying, lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. Joseph was determined that he was not going to allow this woman to stop the blessing of God upon his life. He was not going to allow it to happen. Now, I want to read something here that I did forget to give you. It says here concerning Joseph's family dysfunction, jealousy, God's sovereignty, and hope. Showing favoritism breeds resentfulness. Jacob favoring Joseph, leading to betrayal by his brothers, envious of Joseph's dream and coat, yet revealing God's over plan to use the suffering for good, ultimately save lives through Joseph's trials, urging us to trust God's redemptive purpose, even in deep pain and dysfunctional situations. And so, although Joseph will have to go through some challenges, but the Lord still was going to be with him. And I want to say this before I move on, and I'm coming to a close here, almost here, and I'm in good time. And God still had a purpose for Joseph. And when God has a purpose for your life, the enemy always going to try to get in the way. Always. So in chapter 39, let me read this here. Chapter 39. And you can always go back to the video and write the notes down that I gave you tonight. Chapter 39 remains the message of God's presence, blessing, and steadfast love abide with those who fear him, even in the midst of severe adversity, unjust suffering, and temptation. Joseph's story highlights that maintaining personal integrity and faithfulness to God is a paramount regardless of the consequences. God's consistent presence. The chapter highlights that the Lord was with Joseph both when he was successful in Potiphar's house and when he was unjustly imprisoned. Integrity over temptation. Joseph refused to sin against God and his master's dispute. Intense, persistent pressure from Potiphar's wife, showing the fear of God overcoming temptation. Righteous and injustice. Joseph was rewarded for his faithfulness with responsibility, but he still suffered an unfair imprisonment, proving doing what's right does not always guarantee immediately comfort, yet God is still present. Prosperity in adversity, God's favor allowed Joseph to thrive even in prison, showing that divine blessing is not restricted by circumstances. And so I'm going through here uh, because like I told you before, this is a long story, and I'm just pinpointing some points, and then I want to give you, before I conclude, uh, one of my devices I didn't charge like I should, and it just gave me a warning that I don't have much time for this recording. So I want to make sure I give you um, everything that I have tonight before this thing cuts off. And I do apologize for that. But I have some patriots here that have had the favor of God upon them. We know Abraham in the book of Genesis, known as the father of many nations and God's friend. He was chosen for his faith and obedience to lead the lineage of the promised people. Isaac, the son of promise, he continued the covenant established with Abraham. Jacob, renamed Israel, prevailed with God and of the 12 tribes. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, described as a blameless man who walked with God into a corrupt generation. Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found because God had translated him. For before his translation, he had this testimony that he pleased God. Joseph, despite being sold into slavery, he possessed divine favor, resulting his uh, rise to leadership in Egypt. Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt and spoke with God face to face. David, described as a man after God's own heart. Daniel, known as for his unwavering faithfulness during the Babylonian exile. And so we see here, I just gave you some of the patriots that had favor also with the Lord. Verse 40 of chapter 40 of Genesis, just giving you what happened. We know that the baker and the butler had a dream, and Joseph interpreted the dream uh, for them. The butler his job was restored back, but the baker was beheaded. And of course, in Genesis chapter 41, Pharaoh had a dream, and no one could interpret the dream, but Joseph was able to interpret the dream. And the dream that Pharaoh had, it represented 70 years of plenteous and 70 years of famine. And of course, Joseph interpreted the dream of Pharaoh,